the Solo Coach Podcast.
Good morning, Gareth.
Morning. Hi. How you doing?
Welcome to the podcast. I'm doing very well, thanks. It is fabulous to have you here. And as I always say, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night to everyone listening. It's great to have you here. I've got a fantastic guest for you today, so this is going to be a really special one. So to introduce my guest, Gareth Allen, who we have here, ladies and gentlemen, is a business performance coach and founder of GAP Coaching, which stands for Gareth Allen Performance Coaching. He helps businesses to grow and business owners to sleep better at night. We first met back in January this year at a We Are in Business networking event in Leeds. And fast forward 6 months, we finally met for a one-to-one. We didn't have a coffee, we had a tea. And it turns out that Gareth is a massive fan of the show and also a fellow road cyclist. So we had no lack of things to talk about, and we both ran away. The time ran away with both of us, didn't it?
Yeah, we were there for ages.
Gareth really impressed me with his journey setting up his own business and some of the challenges that he's faced along the way. And one of the many exciting things that Gareth has done was to complete, was it 5 Ironman races in a week?
That's right, yes.
So
yes.
Absolutely loads for us to get into today. I'm sure we won't have time to cover it all, but in the time we have got, I'd love to start by asking you, can you tell us a bit more about what you do as a business performance coach?
Well, yeah, I mean, you gave my strap line there. You know, I help businesses grow, I help business owners sleep at night. And I think, you know, what we try to look at is, you know, if I'm talking to someone who's an architect or an electrical contractor or whatever it is they do, I'm not going to be able to help them be a better architect. It's more about the other stuff that goes around running the business. So, you know, we talk a lot about the sales process, the onboarding process. You know, we spend a lot of time thinking about marketing, how we get out there and find customers, potential customers. But then once you've found them, then what? How do you onboard them? How do you make your conversion rate a little better? You know, so we talk about that a lot. We talk about having systems in place, particularly when they are smaller businesses, maybe solopreneurs, or they've got a couple of employees, and everything's sort of a little bit ad hoc, and people just kind of, oh, that's the way we've always done it. Having nice systems in place, being well organized, just helps. It just helps relieve that mental load. It means you can do more, you can earn more, but also it just means you can relax a little bit more as well. So that's kind of where our focus is. It's just on not making you a better electrician, but just making all the other stuff easier so that you can focus on being an electrician or whatever it is that you do. You know.
Thanks, Gareth. And to roll with that example, let's get straight in there with that example that you mentioned. So with an electrician, if they are listening, or starting electrician's business, electrical business, and say, well, what are you on about with onboarding? What do you mean by onboarding? Can you tell us more?
Yeah, so like I say, you know, you only really need 2 things to be successful in business. You need something to sell, and you need somebody to sell it to. So if most people, when they start a business, they've kind of already got their something to sell. You know, I'm an electrician, whatever it is that you do, you know, you've got those skills. Although not quite, like you might need to figure out what the product looks like, what the service looks like. So we do work on that a little bit. Productization, which is one of those horrible words, but you know, actually taking your skill, your talent, your ability, and turning that into a product is really important. But more important is finding the somebody to sell it to. And as I say, everybody, I don't really consider myself a marketing expert. You know, there are people out there who are marketing experts, but everybody kind of knows, well, I've got to do some advertising, and it might be Facebook ads, or it might be leaflets through the door, or it might be having your van wrapped. We all know what advertising is. But the point is, then what? So, you know, if someone's seen my van with my website on and they come to my website and they put an inquiry and saying, oh, I need a rewire, then what? You know, how do you follow up? Is it a phone conversation? Is it an email? Do you get them face to face? Again, depending on what your business is, the answers to these things will be different. But there's a process. There's a process from first contact to first invoice. And that process, as I say, can look very different for very different businesses, but it will be their process. And then once you've kind of identified that process, you can take each step and improve it and get better at it and refine it.
Okay, so it's the business version of, what do they call it? Field to plate in farming. Probably the wrong term, but it's that that end-to-end process right from the moment someone.
I'm not sure I'm that keen on that analogy, David. That's a bit bloody.
It is, isn't it? It is. But I was thinking more in terms of vegetables, not.
We're
not
not, oh, okay, fine. We're not carving up our customers, David. We're trying to provide a good service.
No, I'm more thinking. So it's talking about right from the moment that someone discovers you and what you do, right through to when they've become a customer, they're on board, they've bought into your service or product, and then they are fully enrolled. Or
Yeah.
even does it move right through to the point where they finish and they've consumed the product, or they've worked with you as a service provider and they no longer need your services? How far does it go?
Well, I mean, we sort of moved on to a different thing there. So, while I was talking about that initial onboarding, but then the next question is, once they have become a customer, do they, is it just a one-off? Do they stay with you? Do they return, or do they subscribers? Do you have a membership? Again, different businesses have different models. But the idea is we spend all this time and effort trying to find new customers, but also you've got the people who've already used your services. They already know, or hopefully they know how good you are. I'm working on the assumption here that you're doing a good job. As long as you're doing a good job, then having a process for going back to those people and trying to provide more services to them is infinitely easier than going out into the wider world and trying to find new people.
I understand. And what the question that came to my mind while you were talking then was, so I've heard a lot about the two schools of thought of have a diverse portfolio, provide lots of services, and have lots of ways for people to pay. And then I've also heard the school of thought of do one thing and do it really well and stick
Yeah.
to it rather than do multiple things badly. I'm wondering what your opinion is on that scale. Is there a happy medium? Does it depend on the person in the business as to
Yeah,
how
I'm
many
I'm I'm
different
sort of
ways they
smiling
sell
as
their product?
I'm smiling as you're asking the question because my answer is going to be maddeningly vague. It depends, because businesses are different, business models are different, but also people are different. So some people just want to have that specialism, they want to have an expertise, and this is all I do. But that doesn't mean you can't offer other services. You just bring in other people to do those services. So if you're well, I've got a friend of mine who's a client, and he is a LinkedIn social media person. So he will take he will post on LinkedIn for you and do reach out on LinkedIn and generate leads for you. That's his business, right? Now, if I said to him, actually, Ben, do you think you could do some Facebook stuff for me? Well, he's got three choices. Number one, he can say, yeah, it's not really what I do, but he's offering me money, so I'll do it. Or he could say, no, sorry, mate, I don't do that. I just do LinkedIn. Go find someone else. Or he could say, well, actually, that's not what I do, but let's see if I can bring someone in and incorporate that into your service. He can charge me more, outsource that to someone else. Potentially, you can make a little profit on it. That's a separate question, really. But the point is, he doesn't have to then what you don't want to do is just say, sorry, mate, I can't help you. If we can find a partner who will be able to provide that service, then that's great. We can incorporate that into our service.
It sounds very much like it's putting the needs of the customer first and trying to figure out a way to get them what they need, whether or not you can provide it. Because I guess in large part, they don't really care who does it. All they need is for that job to get done and that problem to be solved.
Yeah, and I think especially as a coach, you're a business support, business consultant, business advisor. All of these phrases are sort of relevant. And so I don't really ever want to be able to say, sorry, mate, I've no idea. It, but I also don't want to, I'm not sure I'm allowed to swear. I don't want to bullshit people. If they say to me, can you tell me about this specific niche of marketing? I'm not going to say, oh, yeah, I know all about. No, I don't. But I do know someone who I can refer you to, who can, I'm talking about referral marketing here, but having that wider network of experts, of people that you can bring in to help when there's a problem that I can't answer. I think that makes me better at my job. I think that makes me a better advisor, a better support.
And I'm wondering on that specific example as well, if I know that there's the concept of fake it till you make it, and the fact that people will believe in you as much as you believe in yourself. But then I also know that the reality is honesty is the best policy,
Yeah.
and it's important to be honest about your strengths and also your weaknesses and what services you don't provide, so you don't lead someone down a path that ends up confusing or unmanaged expectations.
Mm.
But as a coach, particularly speaking from my own experience, you feel the pressure to perform and the pressure to know what you're talking about and to support your client, but then there's also it can be really important to be honest about your limitations and that your own knowledge gaps and experience gaps.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah.
wondering what comment you make. I think you know what I'm getting at.
I do. Well, you can't fake authenticity. That's the that's the thing, isn't it? And it is a really good question actually, because it's something I wrestled with a little bit last year. So I created this. We'll talk a bit about Launchpad, which is it's a coaching group for solopreneurs. And without going into the detail, it's all people who are on their own. They need a bit of support. But I'm also a solopreneur, and I can't say to them, just look at me. This is how it's perfectly done, because it's not. I'm not. I don't have a perfect business. I am flawed. I am not perfect. And there are parts of my business processes that could be better. There are days when I procrastinate more than I ought to. I know all these things are true, and I think probably that's true of most people. So why pretend it isn't? If I came in and said, right, okay, I'm the coach, I'm perfect, this is how it's got to be. I think, there is I can see why people do that. I'm role modeling. But I think that it is better to role model from that flawed, imperfect position than to try and set a standard that is not achievable. So I made a decision very early on with the Launchpad to just be authentic, to say, look, this is something I'm struggling with as well. We have a lot of group discussions within Launchpad. And, when I first started, I've got 6 people in this group, and I thought, oh my God, I'm going to be coaching 6 people at once. It's going to be really hard. And the first success was they start helping each other, so I'm sort of facilitating and they're working with each other, and that's great. So that takes some of the load off me, and okay, this is really working. I see how this is working. But then very quickly you get to the third phase, which is like, oh, that's a really good idea. And I'm learning things from them. So rather than me try and pretend to the world and your podcast listeners, oh, I'm perfect, just come to my sessions and you will learn everything. That's not true. It's more about facilitation, as learning together. I think I've got some good ideas, but I'm not perfect. And I think that's really important to acknowledge.
I love that, Gareth. I love that. I listen to another podcast, the Ed Mylett podcast, and he often talks about if you want to impress people, show them your strengths and your achievements and flex your muscles. But if you want to connect with them, show them your weaknesses, show
Yeah.
them what you're struggling with, and be more open with them. And one of the reasons I connected so well with you when we met. But in terms of the conversation, let's launch it into talking more about the Launchpad, because what interested me about you, obviously we both focus on coaching solopreneurs, but in a different way, as I know that you've set up a community. So tell us more about
let me
what
give you
that
let me give you the logistics of it first. So Launchpad is an online coaching group for solopreneurs. It consists of 3 things. We get a 1 hour workshop every month, which is a workshop. It's interactive, but it's a workshop on a specific part of the what we were talking about earlier, sales process,
Yes.
being organized. We've done some target setting sessions in December and June for the next 6 months. So it's a business workshop. That's the first thing. The second thing is we have a 1 hour boardroom. So that's when 2 or 3 of the members will bring a problem to the table and we discuss as a group and help each other out. And then the third thing is they get a half-hour one-to-one coaching session with me, and that's where we take what we've done as a group and we sort of make it specific to them. And there's a bit of accountability in that session as well. So, right, you said last month you were going to do this. How's that gone, etc., etc. And actually, in truth, David, that half hour looks very different for different clients because they need a different thing. But that's fine. That's fine. So that's the meat of it. That's what you get for your money. But what I have found is it's turned into this really great community, this support group where not just me, but they're working together, they're helping each other out, and it's become it's kind of a safe space for people just to take that step back and think about their business for an hour every fortnight. Like I said, I think we're all learning from each other, but it's been that fringe benefit of that community feel. I kind of wasn't planning that, but it's really been probably the best bit about it. It's been running for just over a year now, so I'm at that point where I'm reflecting on how it's gone.
Thanks, Gareth. And what's been the value for the people who are in that space?
Well, it's one of those questions I suppose you better ask them. But I would say that we've got them sleeping better at night. That's the line, isn't it? But the idea is they all came to the party. We weren't brand new businesses. They were all up and running, but working on their own. And they're all pretty good at what they do, but it's just a question of, right, well, how do I get a bit smarter about this, use my time a bit more wisely, and either have more time to sell more stuff and make more money, or have more time to relax and go for a bike ride or whatever it is that people want to do. Because again, people have very different goals, very different lifestyles that they're aiming for. That's really important. Not everybody wants to be a millionaire. I went to a training course once, and the guy said at the front, and he sort of said this as if it was an article of faith. Well, we're all here because we want to be rich. And I thought, well, no, actually, that's not why I'm here. I want to have a nice business. I want to be comfortable. I don't want to worry about money, but I don't particularly want to be rich. I want to take Thursday afternoon off and go for a bike ride. I'd rather do that.
So life rich as opposed to
Life
just
rich, yes.
financially rich, but
Yes.
at
But
the cost
but
of
but
life.
David, my point is not that that's the right way to do it. My point is that everyone's got their own motivations and
Yes.
reasons for doing this. Like, we could all just go and get a job, but
Mm.
we haven't. Why? We've all made that decision for some reason. I think that's important to figure out. Well, why? Why am I doing this?
So back, if you can rewind back to when you set the Launchpad up, which I believe was at the start of this year,
It's about a year old now, so it was about
about a year old, about a
July,
year
August
ago.
last year.
How much did you know about what you were creating, and to what degree was it like? If we're over here is I had all the answers and I knew, and over here is it was a complete and utter leap of faith. Where are you on that scale?
Um, I would say I've tweaked the format a little bit, but nothing too dramatic. And I had like 9 months worth of content planned out, and obviously that's gone now. So now I'm sort of writing new content each month. But what's been interesting is it's not been difficult. It's not been difficult to think, oh my God, what we're going to do next month, because the discussions that we have as a group things will bubble to the surface, and okay, everybody needs a little bit of help on this. I will go away and prepare a workshop. We'll discuss it next month. So it's. Let me come back to your question. So how is it different to what I planned? It's not that different, to be honest. I think we already talked about that big early learning point, which was don't pretend to be something you're not. Just engage in this as a solopreneur myself and be honest. And I remember making that decision in one of the first sessions, thinking I could pretend that I know everything about this, but I'm not going to. Let's just be honest here. So I didn't really plan that until it happened, but I think that makes it a stronger group. I think that makes it a stronger service.
I love that, Gareth. And I think that where I was going with that question, I'm a great fan of. I listen to a lot of success stories, and they often have a theme, which is the person before they did the great, amazing thing didn't have all the answers, didn't know how it was going to go. Much like me with my podcast, I didn't have a year worth of guests. I certainly don't have a year worth of topics to talk about, but I sort of had faith that the topics and the guests would appear. And I knew that I
Yeah,
had to start somewhere. And if
yeah,
I waited until I had the perfect jingle, a year's worth of
yeah, yeah.
guests, and all of the answers, and a full editing team, and all the right gear, I would have never started. But I just had to start somewhere, and I think that's what inspired me in our
Well,
conversation when we
actually,
met was
actually,
about
David,
your
I
story.
remember when we talked about this. So yeah, I know what you're getting
Yeah.
at. We because I basically I had the opposite problem. So I am quite a cautious person. I used to be a bank manager. I am by nature quite cautious, and I think about things for a long time, probably to a fault. That old interview question: what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? I think most people, if they're honest, the answer to those two questions is the same thing. So for me, my strengths are, I'm quite analytical and I can consider all the options and look at all the different outcomes before making a decision. But my weakness is exactly the same thing. I take too long sometimes. Anyway, so Launchpad, as I say, we created it, launched it last July, but I've been thinking about it for 2 or 3 years before that, to be honest. So it wasn't like a revolutionary idea that I came up with and launched the next day. It was an idea that had been bubbling away for a little while. So I am quite proud of the fact that eventually it was a leap of faith. But I do think in hindsight I probably should have done it earlier. But that is my nature, and we all have our nature, and you've got to work with it, not try to fight too hard against it.
It's what they say, isn't it? The best time to do something was 10 years ago, or 2 years ago, or a year ago. The second best time is now.
Well, they say that, David, but sometimes you've got to think about things. Maybe it's in a week's time. No, that's a joke. That's a joke. But a sort of, well, it's about 75% a joke. So
Yeah.
no, I like I say, I know my nature. I know I can overthink things, which can sometimes be a problem, but also can sometimes be an advantage in that, I try to plan things out quite well. I always have a good plan in place before launching something.
Thanks, Gareth. And you mentioned there in your last, in what you were saying, that you alluded to the fact that you used to be a bank manager. So I wondered if you could elaborate on that and tell us more about what led you to starting your own coaching business.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, well. So I left the bank 12 years ago. I was a business manager, so I looked after about 150 small businesses, and I was their bank manager, you know. And one of the big targets, we weren't supposed to call them targets. We had aspirations, but you know, we had targets. One of the big targets we had was lending money. You know, so I had to lend. I can't remember what it was, £3 million a year to my customers. Which was, you know, that's what banks do, isn't it? So that's obviously what they wanted us to do. That's what they were paying us for. But anyway, I wasn't all that comfortable working for a bank. It was a bad, my timing was bad. I started working in the banking sector just after the financial crisis in 2008. So it was a difficult time. But I didn't particularly like the sort of the structures of the bank. I think you get this problem with any large organization, whether it's the NHS or teaching or working for a big corporation. I just found it quite stifling. Anyway, and the opportunity came to leave, and I moved to a company called Red Sky. I went self-employed, but Red Sky, I still work with Red Sky. They're a commercial finance broker. They're excellent, and they provide the sort of regulatory support for me. But I am self-employed, and I am a commercial finance broker. So any business that wants to borrow money, I can help them. That's what I do, and that's all I did for the first few years. And what I found was it was I enjoyed it. It was basically all the good bits of my job at the bank without all the rubbish bits. And you know, I would work with a business. Let's say, okay, we're I don't know, hydraulics company. We're going to buy this competitor, and we're going to merge to get everything together. We got economies of scale, and we need £250,000 to make that purchase. So my job on paper was simply to go and get that money for them from NatWest or Barclays or whoever. But what that job looks like is you sit down with the business owner and you start to develop a plan, and you think about how you are going to make those economies of scale, and you think about what the combined sales targets will be. And, you know, I essentially write a business plan. I write a cash flow forecast, which I then take to the bank, and the bank says yes or no. The frustration was you would spend a couple of months doing that, working with the business owner, working with the banks, coming back to the plan, maybe tweaking it, and then we would get the money. So I've done my job, pat on the back, get paid, terrific. But then that was it. But now I feel involved now. I've got to leave, and so I found it a little bit frustrating. So I sort of started coaching a little bit ad hoc. So in that scenario, I was saying, well, can I sort of stick around? Can I work with you for another 3 months, another 6 months, just help you to implement things? And so that's how the business coaching started. And so it kind of, you know, it sort of developed as almost accidentally. But what I realized was this is the bit of the job that I was enjoying. Like the actual broking, the actual getting the funding is great. Like I'm really good at that, and I don't dislike it, but it's the human bit. That's the bit that I really enjoy. There is if you'll forgive me a tangent here, there is a sort of another avenue which is relevant, which is I'm a triathlon coach. So I started I'm a triathlete. That's what I do. That's my hobby. And I was a volunteer coach at my club. And one of the members approached me and asked me if I would coach him one-to-one. Oh, I'm doing an Ironman. Will you help me? Will you give me a training plan? And I kind of, I sort of said, well, I don't really do that. It's not really, I'm not qualified to do that. He said, well, I'll pay you. I thought, oh, that's interesting. I'm sort of half joking, but I went away and I did some qualifications, and I just started doing it as a sort of side hustle, you might call it, a side business. And I had, like, I would have 3 or 4 clients who I was coaching, give them a training plan, work with them every fortnight, and they're working towards whatever their goal is. And what I found was, I mean, with no disrespect to the great sport of triathlon, but it doesn't pay as well as commercial finance. So really? I found I was really enjoying this, but I couldn't, it wasn't a living. So it was like a little hobby business, really. So bringing back 5 minutes to working with businesses, what I realized was the bit that I really enjoy is helping people towards their goals, helping people to set targets, helping people to consistently work towards those goals, holding them accountable, and that human bit as well. So I kind of got this all swirling around in my head. And then COVID happened. So in 2020, when COVID happened, I like the commercial funding market just ground to a halt. So, there was no business. And the triathlon business got really busy actually, and everyone was looking for something to do. So I ended up with quite a lot of triathlon clients, which in hindsight was probably too many, but at the time was great because it was kept me busy and a little bit of money coming in and all that sort of thing. But that's when gap coaching was really born, where I thought, actually, I can bring this all together. It's the thing that I enjoy doing the most is the people development, and I've got all this experience in business. Let's bring it all together, and that's when gap coaching was originally born. So God, I've been talking for ages, David. That was a really long story, but
I
yeah,
I really enjoyed it.
that's the birthing story of gap coaching.
Thank you, Gareth. I love how your coaching journey, it came about so organically from the fact that you were building relationships with these customers, and then at the point where it was time for you to hand over and step back, you felt, no, I'm invested here. I've built a
Yeah,
relationship. I want to
yeah,
see how, and I can so totally relate to that because every job I've ever worked in, even ones that I left years ago, I'm still in touch with the teams, and I still like to know that the school or the business are doing really well, and I
yeah,
like to meet up with them because I built a relationship there. And walking away from jobs hurt for many reasons, leaving, saying goodbye to friends, but also leaving this kind of this journey that I've been on, and getting really invested. I don't know if they call it institutionalized, but
yeah,
becoming invested in the organization's goals and like their growth journey, and then stepping back. It's like when you finish working with a coaching client, it's like, oh, darn, I'd love to keep going, and let's meet up
yeah,
in a year's time. I
yeah,
want to know how you're doing.
yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I know it is, and like I think it took me a while to realize it, but people is the thing. People is the thing that I like, and I'm very good with numbers. I was always good at maths and physics and things like that at school, and that's sort of how I ended up in banking. But no, people is the thing. People is what not just not what interests. Is what keeps me going. Interactions, conversations, human interaction. You have those days, don't you? I work from home. You can see I'm sat in my home office here, and it's lovely. I have no complaints about it. But sometimes you go a whole day, you don't see someone, and I'm sort of stir crazy by the end of the day. So I know that I need people for my own mental well-being. I need other people to interact with.
I can tell. And for anyone listening, what I can say is whenever you're in a room with Gareth, and especially when you meet him one to one, it is impossible not to feel your energy levels elevated and to
Oh,
feel
that's
more
nice.
motivated. And I mean, I was bouncing off the walls after spending a couple of hours with you because you just sort of, your enthusiasm is infectious in a really good, really healthy way.
That is
So
lovely,
thank
David.
you for
Thank you. That's
that.
very nice of you to say.
Um, I almost feel like if I started every morning with a little 15-minute primer call with you, I'd just be smashing through my day. It's a bit like talking to Tony Robbins, but yeah.
Oh no, no, I'm not sure about
But with the energy that he brings to his calls, I mean, goodness me. But what you mentioned there was triathlon, and I'd love to just ask you, what on earth inclined you to do 5 Ironmans in a week?
Well, okay, so let's explain it first. So I did, it's called a Quinn Ironman. And if listeners don't know what an Ironman is, it's a long distance triathlon, takes all day basically. And I did five back to back. And so I'll give you the distances because, I thought you'd never ask. So the distances are 19 kilometers swimming. Then you go straight into 900 kilometers of bike ride, and then you run five marathons back to back. So we started on the Sunday, and you just keep going. You sleep when you need to, and you just keep going until basically the following weekend. So I'd been doing triathlons for a little while, and I worked my way up through the distances. I'd done an Ironman, I'd done a couple of Ironman distance races. And then there was almost this sense of, well, what next? How can I push myself to the limit a little bit further? But what's really interesting is before I did it, I thought there might be I was like, okay, once I've done this, this is a great achievement. This will be inspiring. I can do speeches on this, this will be a great thing to talk about. But like it didn't feel like that. It felt like, well, I just said a minute ago, you're trying to, I thought, test my limits. Let's see if I can find my limits. Well, I did. I did. It nearly broke me. It was physically very difficult as you would expect, but mentally it was incredibly difficult. And I don't know. It's kind of tricky to say because this is like the opposite of a motivational speech. I think you've got to kind of figure out what is achievable and what will the cost be of something before you. And this is me being overcautious again, perhaps. I'll reveal a bit more. I used to drink a lot when I was a younger man. I used to be a big drinker, and I stopped. I stopped drinking alcohol in 20. I haven't had a drink for 15 years. 2010, I stopped drinking, and I started doing triathlon instead. What I can see now in hindsight is that one just replaced the other. So I started small and it was under control, and then it got more and more, and I was training every day, and I was always looking for the next high. When's the next big session going to be? I want a long run on Strava so everyone can see how good I am. All of that stuff. And basically, the Quinn Triathlon in 2022 was the culmination of that, and it felt like it sort of felt like I pushed myself to excess and gone too far. And I know that's not a very inspiring message, David, but I think when you look at the people who do those really extremely long endurance events, I think I don't want to analyze other people, but for me, it was like, well, why are you doing this? What are you running away from? And yeah, I think I just think you've got to be careful that you don't take something you enjoy and burn it to excess. Because now, I still run, I still cycle, but it's very much a hobby now. It's gone back to a sort of reasonable level, and it's a lot more fun now, a lot more fun than it was. I was kind of really pushing myself too hard, I think.
Thank you, Gareth. And that was inspirational because it was so authentic and relatable. And I'm really glad that you felt comfortable to go there. Because for me, in that
I'd love,
discussion,
it's difficult, David. Sorry, I'm interrupting you.
please
It's
do.
really difficult because it feels like it should be a more inspiring story, and the truth of it is, it's really not. And I perhaps if I'd told you this story 5 years ago when I'd done an Ironman, that was great, but then you can kind of go too far with these things.
Exactly. Like we were talking about how men often, I've seen it, I've fallen into this trap with various things before. It's like that addiction to exercise.
Mm,
Men, men's exercise addiction. It's common. You see it all the time, and it might be we're trying to escape how we're feeling,
yeah.
or we're trying to push ourselves to the extreme, maybe to feel something or feel
Mm,
something different.
mm,
And it can often be because there's that raging kind of storm going on in
yeah.
their mind. And I'm speaking from experience of knowing how that is,
Mm,
to feel like that and to just want to scream.
yeah.
So I can
So
fully.
I think it's having suffered from alcohol addiction many years ago. It's the same. It's the same. It's all the same impulses, the same compulsions, the same thought processes. And I look, running marathons is a lot better for you than drinking a bottle of vodka. But mentally it's not. Mentally it's still the same compulsion. And I feel a lot better now that I am a lot more relaxed about it.
I'm curious as to, and thank you for sharing. What would you say to someone who's listening and maybe is finding themselves in that trap, and kind of irrelevant of what the addiction is, they're just finding themselves really frustrated and wanting to get away from how they're feeling and just desperately trying to feel differently. And I'm specifically thinking about men here in the position that you used to be in. What advice would you give to them? What do you wish you'd have known or have heard or found out years ago that you now know?
I do get asked this question a bit, actually, especially on the alcohol thing, because I don't like lead with it, but people know I don't drink, and often men will say, like, I think I've got a problem. Like, what do I do about it? And it's really difficult. I am going to evade your question, David, in the way that I generally evade this question because I don't really know. I did what I did. I stopped, and that's what worked for me, and I think that's probably the answer, but not everyone wants to hear that answer, and it might not be the right thing for everyone. But you can't do that with exercise. Well, you can do that with exercise. You can completely stop exercising, but I don't think that's healthy either. So it's just about finding the right balance. But that infuriatingly, the right balance means something different for everybody, for their life, for their relationships, etc.
Mm.
helping people to figure out what it is that they want from life is the answer. And bluntly, I don't feel qualified to do that. My general answer to this, I will sit and talk to people, I will sit and I'll listen to them, I'll give them my experience. But my general answer is you need to talk to an expert. You need to, I know what I know, and I know just the same way I don't know much about social media marketing. I've got an expert for that. In the same way, I know a little bit about it. I know a little bit about substance addiction, but I'm not an expert. You need to find someone who is an expert for that. I'm
And
sorry if
that's,
that was an invasion, but
no, I think
I
that's
think
a
I
really
also think
great answer,
I
honestly.
also think one of the great things about talking to people is you sort of collect these stories, experiences, and you can share those perhaps. But what you learn is that everyone's different and people experience things in very different ways. And so the person that is sat in front of me, I don't know what the right solution for them is. I mean, my answer to that thinking as a coach is keep asking questions. I always ask more questions and find out as much as I can. And then I will try to give the best advice I can. But uh, I am not giving you a straight answer, David, because there isn't a straight answer. The answer is very different in different circumstances, different people, different timings.
And much like a lot of things in business as well, like we said, the
Sure.
answer to a lot of things is unfortunately it depends. And I know I
Yeah.
started my first client, my first paying client back about 18 months ago. He used to be someone who was it was always about the next gadget, the next thing. And he was really frustrated because he spent so much money on like all sorts of tech cameras,
Yeah.
phones, technology of all sorts. It was like, addicted to Amazon sort
Yeah.
of thing. But um, it was through working together that we figured out that life for him at that time wasn't very happy, wasn't fulfilling, was frustrating. And buying tech, getting the fix from a new piece of tech
Mm,
arriving and doing an
mm,
unboxing, I think he even did unboxing videos for a while, was like an escape. And I know I'm totally guilty of looking for escapes in life from
yeah.
things. And I used to go through lots of cars, honestly, loads of them. But the
Yeah.
point
Me
was,
too.
when we changed his life and we just made small incremental changes in other areas of his life, that lure, that the longing to buy new pieces of tech kind of just lost its appeal. It didn't happen overnight. It happened gradually. And now fast forward, well, definitely in the year we were working together, by the end of that year, it wasn't buying bits of new tech at all because he acknowledged I've got everything I need and I feel better now not buying it. He sometimes added things to his basket and left them in his basket to see how he felt. And he developed his own coping methods and
Yeah.
strategies that was unique and bespoke to him. But the point was, by altering other aspects of his life and getting him feeling better, sleeping better, exercising more, getting his work feeling more fulfilling, his
Mm,
relationships
mm.
improving, then his escape method kind of lost its appeal and was no longer needed.
That's really good. That's really insightful. That escape method. I think that's important because if you're in a situation where you need that thing to be happy, whether it's to get a new car or a new bit of tech or have a pint, that's addiction. That is addiction. I need this in order to be happy. And really the answer is to find other things to make you happy that, you know, generally speaking, it's because you're looking for this high because your life or your feelings are down here and you need to get up there, but then you need to keep getting up there. If you can just raise the bar so that actually I am pretty content with life, I'm in a happy situation, then like I say, I feel like I'm veering into addiction therapy, which I am not qualified for. But if you can remove the need for that short-term hit, then that's how to beat it. Because otherwise, you just replace one thing with another.
Yes. Yeah. And we're, like you say, we're not coming at this from a place of being addiction therapists, fully
No,
qualified. It's
I'm a bit
just
worried
coming at
about
it's
overstating this.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's coming at it from the perspective of just having a conversation man to man. And I go down on a Monday to Andy's man club. I've got a little band in at the
yeah,
minute, and we just all sit together. Nobody in there's an expert, but we're all living life and experiencing life in our own way. And very often, just through having conversations, you see people come week after week, and they start to feel better.
yeah.
And it's nice to see that process because maybe they haven't got access to the various services and maybe they don't want or feel they need them. It's just a case of bonding with someone else and saying, "Oh yeah, I felt like that too, and this is what helped me." Oh, okay, well, I'll give that a try, and then lo and behold, you find yourself feeling better.
I think at the risk of being too deep about it, I think that's we're just biologically wired to be tribal. If you think about all religions have some sort of communion, some sort of congregation.
Mm.
We are better when we come together on some level. You know, that just helps. And sometimes you need to find your tribe, if you'll forgive the pun. But yeah, whether it's, they say this idea of side by side talking, so you're not looking into each other's eyes. You're talking about the bloody jigsaw that you're doing or whatever. That's better than not talking at all. It's fine. Yeah.
Exactly. It's why I use whiteboards in all my coaching sessions, because staring into another man's eyes can be a bit intense for both of us. So having some whiteboards and things to focus on and brainstorming, getting things out of your head onto a whiteboard, I find it's remarkably simple, but it's also really powerful. And often we don't need the super complex theory and methodology and a really complex coaching tool. Often I've found the simple tool of a whiteboard with some coloured pens can be as much as you need to have a fantastic conversation and get to where you need to be.
Yeah, very good.
And then in terms of balance, I'm just curious as to how you balance. You mentioned that you're a commercial funding specialist and also being a business performance coach and also a keen athlete as well.
And a
how
triathlon
do you
coach,
balance all of these roles? I'm sure there's loads more of them as well.
Well, with great difficulty that's not true. That's not true. The answer is I have good systems in place. I always used to say that I've got a bad memory. I'm nearly 50 now, but for 10 years, like my memory, unless I've written it down, I will forget. And I used to say, oh, I'm quite disorganized. I've got my brain jumps around, and I think that is still true. However, what I have done in order to mitigate that is I have got a really good systems in place. I've got a CRM system. I use HubSpot. And everything is in there, from all three different parts of my business. All my personal stuff is there. We're having a garage conversion done at the end of this month. That's in the CRM system because that needs to get done as well. Everything is in one place. And I used to say, oh, I'm really poorly organized. So I've done this and I've done that and I've got this system. And someone once said to me, at what point do you accept you're well organized? I'm like, okay, all right. So I think my brain is quite disorganized, but I have put systems in place that mean I am quite organized. And it's not perfect, David. I'm not trying to present myself as perfect, but I don't generally forget stuff. I make sure everything gets done. And sometimes, like any business, sometimes things can be too busy, and sometimes things get a little bit quiet. And I haven't quite got that perfectly smoothed out yet. But the balance comes just through prioritizing. I don't. When I first started, I thought, well, I'll have Monday and Tuesday to do this, and Wednesday to do that. It doesn't really work like that. I do set aside. So, for example, on a Friday afternoon, I go to a BNI meeting on Friday mornings. So by Friday afternoon, I've been up since 5 o'clock, and I'm a bit knackered. So I block out Friday afternoons to do admin. And you just get all the invoices done and all the paperwork stuff because I don't have to think too hard about that. But that aside, I don't really have a set time to do anything. I see clients at certain times. I've got Launchpad groups at certain times, but it depends what needs doing. It's about prioritizing, isn't it? Planning.
So another answer of summarized with it depends.
Yeah. Yeah, quite.
I like it. No, I like, again, very, very, very honest, and you are incredibly humble and very authentic when it comes to sharing what you're good at and then your weaknesses as well, which is why we've connected and why you're here.
But David, we talked about this, I'm just because you said Tony Robbins, you said I reminded you of Tony Robbins. That's really stuck in my head. I don't like it. But why? But I'm analyzing why did I not like that? And I think that my impression of Tony Robbins and that sort of coach is that they are presenting, look, this is it. I am the guy. I am the man who. This is how it's done. Do as I do. And that is anathema to me. I am not that guy, and I think that's. I'm not going to call it a philosophy. That's way too grand. But that is my philosophy. Is be authentic, and that is not going to work for everybody. Some people respond better to the Tony Robbins model. More people. He's doing a bit better than me. But the people who respond well to me are the people that I can help the most, and that's who I'm looking for. I'm not trying to be a millionaire. I'm not trying to take over the world. I just want to find people that I can work with that will resonate, and I can help, and that's what I'm looking for.
Thanks, Gareth. And I think that leads us really nicely into one of our last questions. I just want to ask you, I think business coaches get a bad rap. And I think people that have not had coaching before, not had business coaching, or maybe had a bad experience, find it frustrating that someone's telling them what they need to do, and the thought that someone's going to tell them how to run their business is really disempowering, particularly as a man. Who are you to tell me what to do with my business? So I'm wondering if you can talk to us about how you work with people, because I know that you're not someone who tells people what to do, but you will support them when they genuinely don't know what to do.
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways of answering that question. So in the world of coaching, there's a sort of debate about coaching and mentoring and what's the difference between them. And you know, coaching is in its purest form. I think if I'm right, David, I think you're more of that sort of type of pure coach where you're asking questions and you're getting people to come up with their own answers, and you're kind of they already know what the answers are. You're just finding the right way of them discovering them. And there's certainly an element of that with what I do. But then on the other side of the spectrum, there's a mentor. And a mentor is someone who has been there and done that. And this is what worked for me. This is what you need to go away and do. And I think I'm somewhere on the line in between those two. I sort of imagine it as this, sliding straight line between the two. And I think I slide up and down that line depending on what the client needs, what they need right now, what they need might be different to next week, and you can kind of slide along that. And as I say, I don't consider that I know everything. So oftentimes they're going to know more about this than I am. So it's just a question of finding the right questions to help them figure out the answer. But then sometimes there are times where this person's never been in this situation before. I know what the answer is here. I know what will work. Let me just tell them. And so there is. It depends. I'm gonna get to put on my business card, David. It depends.
Yeah,
Um,
and
but it's true. It's true.
I can absolutely endorse you in that when I did meet with Gareth for what ended up being a 2-hour conversation, you were really good at asking me some really insightful questions, and then you literally sat on your hands while you were
Yeah.
you sat silently waiting for me to think over the answer. And often I was really taken aback by what you'd asked me, because you'd sort of I shouldn't say triggered me. You'd triggered some thought and made me think, oh my goodness, like really deep reflection. And then other times in the conversation, you were able to ask me about my onboarding process. And when I said, well, what do you mean by that? You were able to then impart some of your knowledge and wisdom and talk about what worked for you in the context of what might work for me. But at no point did I feel like you were inflicting your knowledge on me or telling me that, like, oh, I will teach you something, young man. This is how it needs to be. I didn't feel like it was that at all. I felt we were on an even keel and we were kicking around ideas. And when I was struggling, you were able to chip in with some of your own experience. But you never felt like you were sort of inflicting your
Good.
advice on me.
Good. Well, I mean, good. I think, you said earlier that that stereotype of the person who says, well, who's this guy? How can he tell me how to run my business? I know everything about my business. Well, maybe that guy doesn't need a coach. Not everybody needs a coach. Not everybody will be receptive to a coach. And indeed, some people are more receptive to different types, different personalities. And that's why, you opened this discussion by saying, what about those people who don't feel that they want to coach? Well, maybe they're not right for me. Maybe there's someone else that would work better for them. Business coaches have a bad reputation.
Mm.
I'm not gonna challenge that. I know what you mean, but it's like saying, I don't know, nurses have a bad reputation, teachers have a bad reputation, doctors have, like there are different people within that profession. And especially with coaches, you're going to get completely different styles. I work with another coach who has a very different style to me, and we've referred people to each other because you meet someone and you think, oh, actually, this isn't right. This relationship isn't going to work, but I know a man who you will definitely click with, and that's all right. I think I said this to you. Like, it took me a while. I've been self-employed for 12 years, and it took me a long time to figure out that not everyone's going to like me. I sort of want to be liked. That's a human instinct. And it took me a long time to figure out just some people you're just not going to click with. It doesn't make me a bad person. It doesn't make them a bad person. You just haven't got that chemistry. And that's all right. Let's find the people we have got the chemistry with, that I can work with, that I can help, and I'll work with them.
Thanks, Gareth. And speaking of those people, if someone's listening and is interested, how can they look forward to working with you, and how does that process go? What can they expect?
Well, I have an onboarding process, David, and
Tell us more.
it's all pretty gentle. There's no hard sell. So basically, I do one-to-one coaching as well, but Launchpad is the sort of entry point. So what I would tend to do is, if anyone is interested and would like to have a one-to-one over a cup of tea, not coffee, they can have coffee, it's fine. If anyone would like to have a one-to-one, then we'll sit down and we'll chat. We'll talk for an hour about their business. I'll tell them a bit more about me, but I'll be asking lots of questions. And then after that, if they're interested, if we've got that chemistry, if they think it will benefit them, they can come along for a 3 months trial at Launchpad. So that's the three things that we said: the hours workshop, the hours boardroom, and the half-hour one-to-one. And at the end of that one-to-one, if they want to go ahead, they can become a member. And if they don't, that's all right, because there's no hard sell. Especially with coaching, you've got to have that relationship. It's got to be working.
I like that, Gareth. It's very much a try before you buy experience. And I am looking forward to trying
Yeah,
the
coming along on
Launchpad
Thursday.
on Thursday morning. So if anyone is free on Thursday morning, 8 a.m., you might be able to join as well, as I will
Yeah, we've
be
got two groups now.
coming along.
We started with a group on a Tuesday morning, then we launched a second group on a Thursday, and the idea is that we're going to have a Wednesday lunchtime group, but we're not quite ready yet. We haven't quite filled the second group, but that's the idea. I want to grow it up to my goal is to have 4 groups by the end of the year, so that's what I'm working towards.
Thanks, Gareth. And where can they find you? How can they get in touch?
Well, you can look at my website, which is gapcoaching.co.uk, or I'm on LinkedIn, Gareth Allen on LinkedIn. You can, if you want to connect with me and we can have a conversation. Very happy to have a coffee with, well, maybe not anybody. Is it anybody? You've got to be careful, aren't you? Very happy to have a coffee with pretty much anybody.
Well, thank you, Gareth. It's been a pleasure having you on the show. I hope you enjoy listening to yourself when we release the episode, because I know you're a loyal listener of the show.
Should I mention my other podcast?
Yes,
So
absolutely.
this is
Endorse away.
totally irrelevant to business. So me and my brother have a podcast, which is the British Sitcom History Podcast. So we sit down and we talk about old sitcoms. We've done Porridge and Rising Damp and Bread, you name it. We've done loads of them. So if anyone's interested in listening to a completely non-business related podcast, the British Sitcom History Podcast, my brother would kill me if I hadn't plugged it.
Yeah, and to all my listeners, forget what you've just heard. Don't be listening to any other podcasts. You're not allowed.
The
No, no.
reason I just thought of that, David, is because you said, I hope you enjoy listening to the sound of your own voice. And you know, it's funny, you often hear people say, oh, God, I can't listen to myself. I don't know what this says about me, David, but I do not have that problem. I love listening to myself. I'm sort of nodding along, going, that's very insightful, Gareth.
I like that. Why not? Why not? Why not? And I think, no, genuinely, to people listening, it's really important. I did a whole episode on the importance of switching off. It's important to listen to things that aren't work related. I have so guilty of listening to just personal development podcasts, reading personal development books in every free second of my life. And I've started to realize the value of switching off and listening to other stuff. So I fully endorse.
What's your other stuff, David? What else do you listen to?
And we will put a link in the bottom of in the show notes to Gareth's other podcast, which is called
The British Sitcom History Podcast.
The British
Sitcom
History Podcast.
So what else do you listen to, David? What's your escape? That's not.
What else do I listen to? Well, truth be told, being honest and authentic, Gareth, I'm still working my way through different podcasts. I quite like the Yes Theory podcast. It's a YouTube channel that I follow, and they talk a lot about travel and broadening your mind and taking brave steps. So again, I guess it is probably mostly personal development linked again. I quite like the Auto Alex podcast, which is all about cars and working on cars and fixing them up, and it's distinctly not personal development. But I'm still searching for that fix, which will be something to listen to that's not about personal development at all, because I'm such a devil for creature of habit. So perhaps, Gareth, yours can become my non-coaching.
That's not what I was getting at.
Choice.
But perhaps there's something for your listeners to think about. There is, if someone asks you that question, what's your hobby? What's your escape? Have you got a good answer for that? Because you probably ought to have.
Yes, and when we met, I'll round off by saying one of the biggest takeaways from our conversation, Gareth, when we met, was the point that I needed to take a step back and have some time out of my business and to take up a hobby that was fully mentally engaging, so that I'm not just obsessing continually over my business and taking all my results too seriously. And since then, I've come away and taken some time out and put a little, I wouldn't say it's very big, but there's a little bit of separation between me and my business now, and I'm able to just take it slightly less personally, and that's been really valuable. So yeah, the value of just one conversation with you has helped me very much.
I appreciate that. It was lovely feedback. So thank you.
Thank you. So thank you everyone for listening. That is the end of today's show, and I'm really looking forward to listening back to this episode as well. Thank you for coming on, Gareth, and I look forward to seeing you again on Thursday morning in the Launchpad.
Thanks, David.
The Solo